In further looking at the short-term average versus the long-term average, we had asked Nextera to provide some wind turbine noise modeling, and they did do that. They had Epsilon Associates provide wind turbine noise modeling for 54 turbines, and they said they used a hypothetical but realistic layout. And so when you look at that modeling data, if you look at the average LEQs versus the short-term LEQs, they are lower than the short-term LEQs. So if you note the percentage of receptors in the 46 to 50 dBA category, for the short-term, there was actually 24% receptors were in that category. Then if you looked at the annual, so the year-long average, there were 0% of receptors in that category. So that helps support that, again, the short-term is obviously going to be higher than the long-term average.
Might be some confusion with some people because I got the impression that they thought if you met the setbacks, you didn't have to meet the noise level. It's not an either or, it's both. Mm-hmm. So just because the setback says you need to be, 3.5 times the turbine height to the dwelling, well, if you're 3.5 times back from the dwelling and you still don't meet that 37 dBA, well, you don't get to put it there. You got to put it back further. And their own, the applicant's own modeling that was done by Epsilon Associates kind of concluded that to meet that 37 dBA, a wind turbine would have to be a mile away from a dwelling. Mm-hmm. So in essence, they're basically have a mile setback.
And then last.
The staff addressed this idea of voluntary compliance. It's not voluntary. It's like any other special permit. These folks are putting multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment in the ground. There's no way you're going to put, and you can't just kind of scoot it over a little bit if you were wrong about the noise measurement. They don't even get close to the maximum noise level. They're going to leave room just in case something happened with the modeling or whatever the case may be, or something might change down the road. So what that means is if the decibel is 50, or if the limit is 50 decibels, that's, as you heard about from staff, that's a very short time period average. That's a maximum. So it's not 50 decibels all the time. And in fact, it's really probably never 50 decibels because you can't move that turbine. You don't want to be Somebody asked why we can't guarantee that 37 decibels at night means a turbine will be exactly a mile away from somebody's house. Noise modeling, as the health department staff described, is done very conservatively. As they described, not only are you not going to model something exactly 50 decibels because you can't scoot that $2 million turbine over a little bit if you're wrong. So they're actually going to go down a couple of decibels. Those models also act as if the wind is coming from all directions at all times. And those models also look at the topography, and they look at the combination of wind turbines and how they might play off of each other, again, with different wind directions. So when you get that, 37 decibels at night might be a mile away from a house. It might be a mile and a quarter away from a house. It might be a little bit less than a mile away from a house. It also varies with turbine technology. Some turbines have a different noise profile than other turbines. But when Nextera did the modeling and their consultants, engineers did the modeling at the request of the health department, roughly what it showed is that every turbine to meet that existing non-participant level would be approximately a mile away from a house. But it's not an exact number because it actually depends on the modeling.
But beyond that, really the predominant setback here is driven by sound. The 37 dBA requirement is strict enough to where we cannot cite a turbine. And the model, the turbine that we asked our third-party company to model would be one of the loudest turbines we would consider for the project, and that showed that it would need to be. We couldn't cite a turbine within a mile of a non-participant property. So as far as, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but given the fact that you've got a 37 dBA requirement for non-participants, we have to be set back essentially a mile away from their home. Or even if it's a vacant property, even if the property is entirely vacant, we have to ensure that there's 3 acres of buildable space. And if we can't get someone to sign over a vacant parcel to us, we have to be a mile away from that vacant property.
Well, and that's where just to follow up on the setbacks for the turbine base, which was in the text that we adopted 3 years ago, for non-participating lots, it's the setback shall be 2 times the turbine height measured at the property line, or 3.5 times the turbine height measured to the closest exterior wall of the dwelling unit, which is ever greater, but at least a minimum of 1,000 feet to the property line. So that's where, I think your point is, that's where the physical setback comes in, but with the 37 dBA, you're not going to, that exceeds the physical setback that we have.
That's right. That largely controls. I will say for context, I've worked on projects and regulations in, 20 or 30 counties in Nebraska, almost all of them, and the GE manufacturer recommendation is a 1.1 times turbine height from a property line, so 650 feet, something like that. So your minimum of 1,000, sort of like, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, like your 37 decibel noise limit is the most restrictive and most protective, if you will, of a non-participant in the state with which I'm familiar. A 2 times turbine height requirement is going to be more like 1,100 feet, something like that, from a property line. But you're also right that really the noise setback is probably always going to be the controlling factor for a non-participant.
So you brought up the manufactured recommendation and that was something that was brought up again. That was something that was brought up 3 years ago as well. And at that time, again, the applicant at that time did address it, but I guess I'll let you guys speak to that.
GE, just we almost exclusively get our turbine equipment from GE, and they have published a setback consideration document. It's public, and we're happy to share it with you, and therefore it'd be public information. And they recommend 1.1 times tip height as a setback. So that's where that number's coming from.
Right, but then what happens is that they will provide, in the modeling study, the decibel levels created by the turbine, and that's what the modeling is based on.
Right.
That's right. They provide a noise profile for each turbine.
That's
Yep.
noise profile.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
Sorry.
And the modelers use that.
Yeah.